Alright guys, today we are going to look at lesson 2.4, which is multiplying rational numbers. So that means we're going to be looking at multiplying fractions or multiplying decimals. And the good news is when we are multiplying rational numbers, we are going to use the same rules that we use when multiplying integers. Alright, here is our first example. So in this first example, we have -2/7 times 1/3. So when we're multiplying rational numbers, we're going to multiply straight across the top. So 2 times 1 gives us 2. And then we're multiplying across the bottom. 7 times 3 gives us 21. Here, we can see that we are multiplying a positive and a negative. So these have different signs. Because they have different signs, our answer is going to be negative. The example next to it has the same numbers, but this time we have two negative numbers. And if we multiply a negative times a negative, our answer is positive. All right, so let's go ahead and try to do that on our own. All right, so looking at this first one, I have a positive times a negative. I have a positive times a negative. So right away, I know my answer is going to be negative. So in order to multiply these fractions together, I am going to change the mixed number to make it an improper fraction. So I'm going to do 2/5 times, that is going to become 3 times 3 is 9. 9 plus 1 is 10, so I get -10/3. All right, before I multiply across, I'm going to look to see if I can simplify. And here I can simplify the 10 and the 5. So if I divide by 5, 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So now I can multiply across, and I end up 2 times 2 is 4. 1 times 3 is 3, right? I had a positive times a negative, so I end up with -4/3, or -1 1/3. All right, looking at B, now we're going to be multiplying decimals. So when I'm multiplying these decimals, I'm going to ignore them completely to start, okay? So I'm going to pretend like that decimal is not there, okay? So I'm going to move it once, I'm going to move this one twice. So I'm going to multiply 41 times 9. Okay, so when I multiply 41 times 9, I end up getting 369. Okay, I know that a negative times a negative is positive, so I have a positive 369. Okay, now I'm going to pay attention to my decimals. When I moved those decimals in the beginning, okay, you can see that those blue swoops, I had to move the decimal 1, 2, 3 times. So I need to do that with my answer. So 369, right now my decimal's over here. So if I move it 3 times, 1, 2, 3, my decimal's ending over here. So I get 0.369, or 369 thousandths. 369 thousandths. All right, let's try one more of each. All right, so in C, I'm back to multiplying mixed numbers. So I'm going to take those mixed numbers and I'm going to rewrite them as improper fractions. So if I do that, I get 7/3 times -9/2. All right, again, I'm multiplying a positive and a negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative right off the bat. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look to simplify. Okay, the 7 and 2 do not simplify, but the 3 and 9 do. So if I simplify, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So when I multiply 7 times 3, I get 21. 1 times 2, I get 2. And we said our answer was negative. So we get -21/2, or -10.5. I should write it as a fraction because we are in fraction form. So negative 10 and a half. All right, back to decimals. So when I'm multiplying these decimals, right, I'm going to pretend like these decimals aren't here. So I am multiplying 25 and 36. Okay, I'm multiplying 25 times 36. So when I do that, 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 2 is 12 plus 3 is 15. I add my 0. 3 times 5 was 15. 2 times 3 is 6 plus the 1 is 7. Right? We add those numbers together and we end up with 900. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to put those decimals back in. So to move this, so there are no decimals, I need to move it, I need to move it once and once over there. So in total, I need to move it 2 times. So if I have the number 900, right, and I move my decimal twice, 1, 2, I end up with the answer of 9. And now I want to look, I had a negative times a positive, so I know my answer is going to be negative 9. All right, so that is how we multiply our fractions and decimals. So let's look at one where it's a little bit more complicated. All right, here it says use properties to multiply rational numbers. Okay, so in order to make our lives easier, remember when we're multiplying, we can multiply in any order. So I am going to want to rearrange this problem so that I can make my math a little simpler. So I'm going to multiply 1/5 and 5 together. Okay, and then I am going to multiply my other two numbers, which are negative 0.4 and negative 20. All right, so I just rearranged the problems. I crossed them off just so I made sure I used all of my numbers when I rewrote it. All right, so let's look at that first group. So 1/5 times 5. I can write that as 5 over 1, right? And when I simplify, I end up with 1 over 1, which is just 1. In my second group, right, I am going to pretend that those decimals do not exist, right? So I am doing 4 times 20. I know 4 times 20 is 80. Here, a negative and a negative make a positive, so I have positive 80. Now I'm going to look at my decimal. This decimal I need to move 1 time. So if I move my decimal once here, I end up with 8. So I end up with 1 times 8, which is an answer of 8. All right, in B, I am also going to rearrange this problem to make my life easier. So the one that I see that sticks out to me is 1/7 multiplying it with negative 7. Okay, so that means in my other group, I'm going to do 4/5 and negative 1/2. Okay, again, I crossed them off just to make sure I used all the numbers. Okay, just like last time, I'm going to put that 7 over 1. And then here I can simplify. If I divide by 7, I get 1. Here I get negative 1. So on the left, I end up with an answer of negative 1. Okay, in my group on the right, I can also simplify the 4 and the 2. So if I simplify there, I get 2 and 1. So if I multiply across, I end up with a negative 2/5. So I have negative 1 times negative 2/5. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive 2/5. All right, go ahead and pause the video here so that you can try those practice problems with your teams. All right, go ahead, pause the video here and try those practice problems with your team. When you finish trying, you can press play so that you can see those answers and see if you solved the problem correctly. All right, so looking at the answers to our practice problems, from the first problem, I just made that fraction over 1, and I multiplied straight across the numerator and denominator because nothing could simplify. So I ended up with a negative 12 over 7, which is equal to a negative 1 and 5/7. In B, I pretended that those decimals were not there, so I multiplied 27 times 3, and when I did that, I ended up with an answer of 81. Okay, then I went back to look at my decimals, and I needed to move it twice. So when I moved my decimal twice, I ended with 0 and 81/100ths. A negative times a negative is positive, so I ended up with a positive 81/100ths. In 3, we also have some decimals here, so I'm going to pretend that those decimals are not there, and I'm going to multiply 15 and 32. So I'm multiplying 15 and 32. So when I do that, I end up with 30, and then so I end up getting 480. Right, now I'm going to go back and look at my decimals. Right, I had to move the decimal twice. So if I move it twice, I end up getting 4.8. Here I was also multiplying a negative and a negative, so my answer is going to be positive. You could also say 4.80, right? 4 and 8/10 or 4 and 80/100ths are the same answer. All right, looking at the bottom problems, I am going to do a little rearranging here to make my life easier. So I'm going to start by multiplying the two decimals. So negative 0.4 times negative 0.5, right? And then I'll multiply it by the 5/8 after. So if I multiply this, right, I'm pretending those decimals don't exist. 4 times 5 is 20. And when I put that back into place, I have to move my decimal twice. So I end up getting 0.2 or 2/10. So 2/10 times 5/8, well, I can go ahead and simplify here. That's going to be a 1, that'll be a 2. I can simplify the 2 and the 8 as well. That's a 1, that's a 4. I end up getting 1/8 as my answer. All right, in the next one, I'm also going to do some rearranging. I'm going to put the two fractions together. So 2/5 times 3/5. And then the decimals, so 0.2 times negative 0.4. So if I multiply the two fractions together, I can't simplify, so I get 6 over 25. If I multiply the decimals together, right, I'm going to ignore it. 2 times 4 is 8. I had to move this twice. So if I move it twice, I end up getting 0.08. Here I have a negative times a positive, so my answer is going to be negative. All right, in order to multiply these together, I'm going to turn negative 0.08 into a fraction. So that's 6/25 times, that is a negative 8/100ths if I wrote it out. All right, now I'm going to look to do some simplifying here. So if I simplify, let's see, that can become a 3, and that can become a 50. Can I simplify anything else? All right, I think we might be simplified here. So if we multiply, we end up getting, oh, I actually can simplify. I'm going to simplify the fraction on the right. So I have 3 over 25 times, I can divide these by 2. So that's going to become a negative 4 over 25, right? So I am going to end up with let's see, 25 times 25 is 625, and 3 times 4 would be a negative 12. So I get negative 12 over 625. If you had happened to change these to decimals instead of fractions, you would have ended up with negative 0.0192, okay, if you went that route. All right, last one here. If you simplified, the 5s will cancel. The 3 will become a 1. The 6 becomes a 2. So you end with 4 times negative 1/2, which ends up just being negative 2. All right, hope you guys did well on those. If not, make sure you fix your answers. And then go ahead and flip to that last page. Okay, the last page, we have a word problem. All right, in our word problem, it said a school record for the 40-meter dash is 15.24 seconds. Predict the school record after 15 years when the school record decreases by about 0.06 seconds per year. What are your thoughts and ideas? All right, so if I were looking at this one and I know that my time is going down each year, I know that that 0.06 is going to be a negative 0.06, right? If it's decreasing, it's going down. If that happens each year for 15 years, I know that I need to multiply that by 15. Okay, so in order to multiply those two numbers, right, I'm going to pretend that that sign doesn't exist. So I'm going to do 15 times 6, which is going to give me 90. Okay, I have a positive times a negative, so I'm ending at negative 90. Okay, but those decimals do exist, so I need to go back and put them in, right? To move it to 6, I would have to move this twice. So I need to move this decimal twice. So it ends up being negative 0.9. So if the record goes down by 0.9 seconds, and we started at 15.24, right, and I'm taking that away, making sure I'm lining up my decimals, okay, I am going to end with 14.34 seconds. And then finally our challenge, if you got to the challenge, this one you had to use substitution. So for this problem, I would substitute that value in. So I get 1/2. Z was a negative 1/5. And then minus 2/3. Y was 3. Okay, so if I multiply these together, I can multiply across, right? So here I get a negative 1/10. In this one, those 3's are going to cancel, so I get a negative 2. I'm going to rewrite this subtraction problem as negative 1/10 plus a negative 2. So now I can see that these have the same signs, so my final answer is negative 2 and 1/10. Right, that is it for the notes today. Again, make sure you have everything written down. If you need to go back and rewatch anything, please feel welcome to do so. Otherwise, you can return to the agenda and continue working on your next assignment.